But I have said many times, and it's based on what Mario Savio talked about way, way, way back. My God, what, 60 years ago? Roughly 1964 at Sproul Hall, UC Berkeley. You remember? You remember reading about it. This is what he said. Now, let me, before I share with you what he said, he was talking about a situation at the university at UC Berkeley, and it was a very localized situation, but the way Savio put it, it sounded to me like something from any pacifist revolutionary who is determined to stop the injustice being perpetrated against a group, a city, a state, a country, a people. So it's applicable, I think, what he said to so many situations. Here is what he said, and this is just the excerpt. It's not the entire speech. Now, there are at least two ways in which sit-ins and civil disobedience and whatever, at least two major ways in which it can occur. One, when a law exists, is promulgated, which is totally unacceptable to people, and they violate it again and again and again till it's rescinded, appealed. All right? But there's another way. There's another way. Sometimes the form of the law is such as to render impossible its effective violation as a method to have it repealed. Sometimes the grievances of people are extend more to more than just the law. They extend to a whole mode of arbitrary power, a whole mode of arbitrary exercise of arbitrary power. And that brings me to the second mode of civil disobedience. There's a time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart, that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all. That doesn't mean, and I know it will be interpreted to mean, unfortunately, by the bigots, that doesn't mean that you have to break anything. 1,000 people sitting down someplace, not letting anybody by, not letting anything happen, can stop any machine, including this machine, and it will stop. Now, that's the end of the part of the speech that to me was so profoundly obvious and so profoundly necessary as the years went by. I didn't hear the speech in 1964. I heard it later. I heard it repeated over and over and over again. I heard it repeated when Students for a Democratic Society were formed. I heard it in the Bay City Manifesto. I heard it in Chicago. I've heard it in Atlanta. And it applies now. And the thing that to me was so prescient on the part of Mario Savio, when he said, sometimes the form of the law, he's talking about the law that needs to be changed. And in this country, it's the law that allows weaponry, massive amounts of weaponry in the hands of civilians. But he said sometimes the form of the law is such as to render impossible its effective violation, or as a method to have it repealed. He added, sometimes the grievances of people are about more than just the law, but extend to a whole mode of arbitrary power, a whole mode of arbitrary exercise of arbitrary power, end quote. And of course, that is in perfect alignment to what we all know has happened in so many of our state legislatures, that there has been manipulation by these Christian fascists that render impossible by elective means, removing them, taking away their minority power. That has so much effect. If through minority manipulation, these various states are controlled by Christian fascists to the extent that they have gerrymandered the districts in their state, the congressional districts, so that only other Christian fascists can be elected to the federal government, then even if they are in the minority within the state, they now control the majority of power from that state and have effective power when they go to Washington, D.C. This is what Savio was talking about 60 years ago. And this is what you and I have got to come to terms with. We have got to do it. Because that time that Savio talked about, when the operation of the machine becomes so rotten and filthy and odious that it makes you sick at heart, that you can no longer take part. And by the way, that's what the Christian fascists are hoping for, that people become so goddamn disgusted, so turned off by what's happening in the civic atmosphere of this country, that they just bail out and say to hell that I'm not going to vote anymore. How many times have you heard this? Well, both parties are the same. That's bullshit. They're not the same. But that's what the fascists are hoping for, and that's what Savio was talking about. Sometimes the grievances of people are about more than just the law, but extend to a whole mode of arbitrary power. Like, for example, to pull one out of thin air, the Electoral College, maybe, that now hangs in a position where the Christian fascists can totally invert a popular election in this country, and will try to do it in 2024. Why do we still have something as racist and sick as the Electoral College? We've had 2 Christian fascist presidents who lost the popular vote and still gained the presidency. 2 that I know about. Bush 2 and this filthy Donald Trump. And having many times, either in broadcast or just in my own personal musings, many times have I referred back to what Mario Savio said and how prescient his words were. I mean, he couldn't have known this. He couldn't have known that fascism was going to, maybe he did. Hell, I don't know. 60 years ago, who would have thought that there would have been an open attack by Americans on the seat of American government in an attempt to destroy it because of the wild, insane ramblings of a fascist son of a bitch, a sick monster like Donald Trump? I find it almost impossible, although maybe not, to think that Mario Savio, who was, I believe at the time, a grad student, had the ability to look that 60 years into the future when he wouldn't be here, and know what was heading our way. Maybe he did. Maybe he could see it. Dr. King was able to see it. There have been a number of people in this country who were able to see it and tried to warn us about it. We have got to take the action of inaction. I can't think of anything more effective, short of slaughter, and I'm not ever would advocate that under any circumstances. But in order to bring this machine that allows AR-15 semi-auto assault rifles, military-style weapons, all over this country, the machine has allowed that. The machine run by the Christian fascists. So how do we stop it? Well, Savio said, you throw your bodies onto the gears. You make it stop. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.